What is up, all you minties? This is the Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, and I have absolutely no idea why I left all these books out in stacks, but I figured I could go ahead and use them for the intro and the outro since I was using it for a thumbnail anyway. So today, I'm going to be talking about my top 10, it's my list, my top 10 favorite X-Men events. So, please stay tuned. And welcome back, all you minties. Now, before I get started, I wanted to quickly define what an event was and what a storyline is, because we're talking about events. Storyline usually takes place during a long period of time. Sometimes a storyline isn't resolved for, 2-3 years, sometimes a decade. However, an event is something big that happens that involves nearly all the characters of an ongoing title. So we're not just restricting ourselves to crossover events. For example, like Avengers vs. X-Man, that's a crossover event. Because the Dark Phoenix is an actual event that happens in the ongoing title of Uncanny X-Men. And also, we can't do one-shots, so God Loves, Man Kills will not be on this list. Now that I got that out of the way, this is my list, right? So I would love to know what you all would put on your list of top 10, top 5, whatever that may be. But this is my list, and it's all subjective. These are the ones that I enjoy the most and I think are the best of the X-Men events. I will be doing other lists later, like Batman and Avengers. But for now, we're kicking it off with, of course, Uncanny Omar, Uncanny X-Men. And one last thing before we get started. This is not a countdown. It is just a list of the 10 best X-Men events. So let's kick it off with the very first X-Men crossover event, and that is Mutant Massacre. This is the one that kicked off what is known as the summer crossover events. Every summer after this, X-Men fans expected to have a crossover of some sort. Whether it crossed over with the pages of New Mutants and XFactor and Uncanny X-Men, every once in a while they would throw a bone to Excalibur and just say, oh, here's some red skies for Inferno, whatever, you're part of this. But this is the one that kicked it off. This is when the writers and the editors decided there's way too many mutants, let's kill a bunch off. So they introduced these new characters called the Marauders, where the Marauders went down to the sewers and started just killing off a bunch of mutants, a bunch of these Morlocks. The X-Men stepped in, and a lot of them were gravely wounded, such as Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Kitty Pryde. So much so that they left the team. So a lot of changes were made during this event, and we are introduced to new characters too. Next up on the list is Extinction Agenda. This is one of my all-time favorite crossovers. This is the payoff to a lot of build-up between the characters of Cameron Hodge, Genosha, what happened in the events of Inferno. Everything leads into this event. It makes it almost like a political, oh, it's time to get serious, time to roll up the sleeves. Makes it almost like a political event because of, we had laws that wouldn't let the X-Men go and rescue their kidnapped team members. So it all kicks off with the Genoshans, the magistrates coming in and kidnapping a bunch of mutants because of past sins that they had done. And there's some revelations here where perhaps one of the X-Men is one of these magistrates, didn't know he was a mutant. So it's a huge fight. There's an amazing scene between Archangel and Wolverine where they have to fight. There's some really powerful moments with gorgeous artwork by Jim Lee. There's some, Rob Liefeld does some of the stuff in here, and I can't remember, John Bogdanove? Oh my goodness, that's how you, I have to say his name again, because that's not the only time he's on the list, but Extinction Agenda for sure. Probably one of the earliest events that happened in X-Men is Days of Future Past. This event, it was only 2 issues long. Now, had it been written these days, I'm sure it would have been a 12-issue maxi series with a bunch of little mini-series revolving around it. But for 2 issues, Chris Claremont and John Byrne just made magic happen. It's a possible future where the X-Men are being hunted by the machines called the Sentinels, and the only chance they have is to send Kitty Pryde, Uncanny Omar talked pretty one day, Kitty Pryde back into time to warn everybody of the events that are to come. And we're introduced to some other characters that will later join the X-Men. And I think this is the very first time we see exactly how powerful one of the members of the Fantastic Four will be. So, Days of Future Past. I mean, it kicked off every possible future event after that. Days of Futures Yet to Come, Days of Future Present, Days of Past Present, whatever, all these other events, even to an extent, I guess, Age of Apocalypse. No, wait, that was more of an alternate timeline. Forget what I said. Next up, X-Cutioner Song. How can I not talk about this event? what originally started as an event called The Sins of the Father, pretty much this was an event that was going to be helmed by Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, but then they ended up leaving, and Will Portacio, they ended up leaving and going to forming their own company called Image. So that kind of left the X-Men editorial team with like, oh crap, what are we going to do? So Fabian Nicieza stepped in because he was pretty much the scriptwriter for X-Force at the time, and said, all right, we can resolve some of these plot points that have been ongoing for a long time. So this is the story of Strife and Cable and how they are connected. Professor Xavier gets shot. The X-Men don't trust anybody. They're trying to hunt down where Cyclops and Jean Grey are as they're kidnapped. We're introduced or reintroduced to the Mutant Liberation Front. Each one of these issues had a polybag. Pretty cool little gimmick with a little trading card that you would collect. So yeah, this one was awesome. I think I was in high school when this came out, and I looked forward to every single chapter within the pages of XFactor, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, and of course X-Force. And there's some gorgeous artwork in here by Greg Capullo, Andy Kubert. So yeah. Oh, Jay Lee. Yeah. Next up is X-Men Messiah Complex. For the longest time during the early aughts, the X-Men weren't talking to each other. It was a really weird time that events in one book really didn't reflect on what was happening in another X book. I felt like the X-Men were just so divided. And then Ed Brubaker came in, and with the help of Peter David and Kyle and Yost, they came in and did a new event, and it was called Messiah Complex. And this event kind of kicked off all the titles talking to each other again. So we had a crossover event between Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, what was known as just X-Men at the time, and it was about to change to X-Men Legacy, and New X-Men, and I know all these titles kind of get confusing, and XFactor. So it was pretty much a huge crossover event with just about every bad guy that has ever fought the X-Men, just about, not all of them. You had the Marauders back, you had the Acolytes that were back, you had Mr. Sinister show up. It's just a awesome crossover that gave you hope that all these titles were going to be heading in one direction. And sure enough, after that, they did. So Messiah Complex deserves a place in there. Now, at this moment, I'd like to remind you all to please smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet. We put out videos every day. Don't forget to ring that bell for notifications to let you know when our videos are going live. So keep that in mind. And moving on to the next event. One of the biggest events that happened in the 90s was this idea that they were going to go back in time, kill Professor Xavier instead of Magneto, on accident of course, and then relaunch all the lines. Unprecedented for as far as X-Men. And at the time, as a kid, we didn't know how long this was going to last. We thought this was the new status quo, that Age of Apocalypse was going to be the new X-Men status quo. So, in a series of unfortunate events, Legion goes back to the past with the whole intent to go and kill Magneto to make the world a better place, but accidentally kills his own father, and therefore sets off a series of events that creates this Age of Apocalypse, where Apocalypse is now the ruler of this world where mutant kind rules over mankind. And it's a dark world because a lot of characters are twisted. Cyclops and his brother Havoc are evil. Wolverine's kind of hanging out with Jean Grey. You had the Astonishing X-Men. And what was cool about this, that I always thought, the original idea was to call them the Mutants, because that's what Stan Lee wanted to call the X-Men when the title first came out. So the original idea was to have the Astonishing Mutants and then the Amazing Mutants. But I guess in the end, I thought maybe they thought that would have confused too many people, so they decided to stick with the Amazing X-Men and the Astonishing X-Men. Gorgeous artwork by Joe Madureira, Andy Kubert, Adam Kubert, Steve Epting. So yes, this event deserves to introduce us to the character of X-Man, Steve Scrooge, Chris Bachalo, all these wonderful talents, and of course Fabian Nicieza and Scott Lobdell helming that event. Now, this next event I'm going to talk about only came out last year, and of course I'm talking about Jonathan Hickman, R.B. Silva's, and Pepe Larraz's amazing House and Powers of X, the 12-issue maxi series that gave us a new status quo. It is really heartbreaking to be an X-Men fan. For as long as I have been, 35 years, you read a lot of ups and downs. You get excited for a new creative team. You get excited when an X-Men title is relaunched, because there's always a hope that, oh, it's good to be an X-Man fan again. And honestly, 50% of the time, you're completely disappointed, and you're like, why am I still reading this stuff? But this damn series, when it kicked off, when you got to House of X, when I got to House of X 2, I was like, I'm so damn happy to be an X-Man fan. Like, it feels good to be reading X-Man every month again. And it set up a new status quo with Dawn of X. So this deserves a spot on my list. This was an amazing maxi series, like I said, by Jonathan Hickman, and they're not done. That's the beauty of it, that Dawn of X is still continuing. So we've yet to see where he's going with this story. Retconning, but hell yes, good retconning when it's done properly works. Next up on the list is a miniseries, the 4-issue miniseries that almost feels like Chris Claremont cheating a little bit and making them Uncanny X-Men titles, and that is Fantastic Four versus the X-Man. In the aftermath of the Mutant Massacre, when I said Kitty Pryde was mortally wounded with Nightcrawler and Colossus, the X-Men reach out to Mr. Fantastic for some help because they're trying to stabilize the molecules of Kitty Pryde, because she is phasing, literally turning and disappearing, right? Turning from a ghost to just disappearing. And during this time, the Fantastic Four is going through their own inner turmoil because they find a diary. And if you've not read this, it is a damn awesome twist. And it also shows us the potential of Franklin Richards, too, and what he can do. Dr. Doom gets involved, there's a huge misunderstanding, there's a fight, but I love this story. And even though it read more like an Uncanny X-Men title, the way that Claremont wrote the FF, I remember during this time as a kid, I was like, oh, I would totally read Fantastic Four monthly if Chris Claremont was writing it. The art is in this, by the way, again, John Bogdanove. So sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Now we're left to our last two. Obviously, if you've been watching the channel for a few years, you know what's going to be on here. And XFactor Endgame is on here. This is one of the biggest events that, to me, doesn't get talked about a lot. There's a lot of wonderful things that happen here. And it's pretty much the story of the final fight between Apocalypse and his arch nemesis, the original X-Men, which are now X-Factor. This is Chris Claremont's almost last hurrah before he leaves. He's scripting the actual comic book because the writers are Whilce Portacio and Jim Lee. They're the ones that are plotting the story. So it ties in the story of Cable, and then Cyclops having to send his son to the future in order to save him from this techno-organic virus that is killing him, giving his son up to the Askany, who is a cult, I guess, if you will, or maybe his sister, Nathan's sister. But the big thing is we're introduced to these new characters called the Dark Riders, and at the very beginning, the Dark Riders, I believe in issue 65, they are sitting there and they're talking about, Apocalypse is showing them on screen, of course, like, how would you take out this character? How would you take out Cyclops? And each of the Dark Riders kind of calls dibs on who they're going to take out from the members of X-Factor. This is where Apocalypse takes his ship back, it's known as Ship, and it is the final fight, and there's this beautiful moment that, of course, I always mention about Cyclops, quoting, "The eyes are a window to the soul." It includes the Inhumans, it includes a trip to the moon, and the final fight with Apocalypse with new bad guys called the Dark Riders, which the designs were so badass. I love this. It's probably one of my favorite events of X-Men, and that's why it's on the list, leading us to the final event. It is a crossover event, but it gets no better to me than Fall of the Mutants. Fall of the Mutants. I know it's not really a crossover event. I guess that's the international symbol for crossover. But it's so powerful what happens in each title. So it's pretty much X-Factor, Uncanny X-Men, and New Mutants. Even though each one is labeled as Fall of the Mutants, they're all dealing with their own thing. X-Factor's dealing with the fact that Warren, one of their team members, Angel, had been crippled and tried to commit suicide. And Apocalypse has taken him under his wing, making him his fourth horseman, Death. So he's changed him. He's made his skin blue. He gave him metal wings, and now he's known as Death. And they have to fight their team member. There's also a betrayal. Oh man, and that's Louise Simonson and Walter Simonson dealing with that. Meanwhile, in Uncanny X-Men, we have Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri with the fight against the adversary. It's this almost supernatural being, and it takes place in Dallas, and the X-Men have to go and fight and make the ultimate sacrifice to take this villain down, leaving Forge alone to explain what happens. But anyway, they're gifted this wonderful thing from the goddess Roma called the Siege Perilous, but that's another story. But oh my god, and there's a beautiful scene where they're about to make the ultimate sacrifice. They know they're going to die, and the reporter that's filming the whole thing tells Wolverine, "Sir, I just want to shake your hand," because he realizes this is a hero, right? Because mutants during this time are hate. Mutants during any time are completely hated by humanity, and there was just this beautiful moment between them, between humanity and mutant kind, and gave us all hope. And then, of course, the sadness of what happened in New Mutants that was Louise Simonson and Brett Blevins, where the New Mutants are hanging out on this island with their friend Birdbrain. They're introduced to a villain, and one of them ends up getting killed. And it was one of those moments that you're like, wait, what? The character just died. Not that a lot of people care for the character, but then the aftermath is what made it sadder. But yes, Fall of the Mutants. If you were to ask me what my favorite X-Men event was, it's Fall of the Mutants. I know I said it wasn't a countdown, but I figured I'd just throw that in there. Now, luckily, a lot of these are collected in the new X-Men Milestone. Some of them are still available in oversized hardcover format and in omnibus format. And if you're wanting to pick any of these up, please check out our sponsor,
cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for brand new graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off the cover price. Cheap Graphic Novels prides itself on packaging your books so they arrive safely and in excellent condition, as well as prompt and helpful service. And check out their bargain bin for even greater deals up to 90% off cover price. And for you Minties, Cheap Graphic Novels is running a special promotion. If you're a first-time customer, let them know you were referred by Near Mint Condition at the checkout, and you'll receive a credit for free shipping on your next order. Now, this is only for U.S. customers. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discounts, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more.
Now, that was my list. This was a very hard list to come up with. Let me know in the comments down below what you would put in your top 10. And if you don't have 10, give me your 3, your 5, whatever you have. Just don't make it over 10, please. Leave those comments down below. I love talking to you all. Please, everybody, remember to hit that like button, subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, ring that bell for notifications. We can be found on Patreon and Redbubble. And all of that information is in the description down below. Again, check out our sponsor, please, cheapgraphicnovels.com. Tell them we sent you their way. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you would have picked for your favorite 10 X-Men events. So leave those comments down below. And more importantly, please remember, everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love, everybody.